Hey, this is your boy Eternal King coming back to you with another LOR video today. I actually kind of thought that there wasn't going to be any more LOR news for a little while because the meta for Eternal was nice and diverse, but also at the same time somewhat settled in terms of what was performing best, right? And, you know, your eddies, your aggros, and then your temples was kind of defining the meta. Now, while that hasn't changed, at least as far as I know, I'm sure there are certain lists that are performing slightly better. Maybe mid-range has come out a little bit. Maybe combo has come out a little bit. I don't believe so, though. Not that I know of. Um, you know, maybe Yetis. Sometimes Yetis sneaks in a little bit and will put up some decent stats. But the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I accidentally made another meta deck. And that happens from now and then. I've done videos on this before. I'm going to talk about like all the big Eternal King meta decks that kind of didn't really get credited to me. So first up, I made Standard. I don't play much, and I don't do a lot of Standard brews. But it is true that there was a Nightfall deck that was heavily inspired by my approach to Nightfall that did very, very well in Standard in a recent season, and so that was my deck. But more so, obviously, it's going to be Eternal brews because that's what I do regularly. First up, I built the best version of Ryse, pure Ryse. Obviously, some people meme and they're like, I'm just going to stick Eddie and Ryse, and then Ryse doesn't matter. And it's like, yeah, you can do that. But then you're just building a bad Eddie deck, and then you should just play a good Eddie deck that will win 10% more automatically by just being a good Eddie deck. But in terms of like pure Ryse with like a good win rate, this is the best version of Ryse. Started off a couple seasons ago at like a 50% win rate, which is actually better than anything that's currently on the site in terms of meta stats. And then it kind of just got better from there. And I was able to further and further hone the list further and further, kind of crack down on what the deck did well. So stuff like, I really like Rejuvenating Breeze, but, you know, 3 of them's too much. When you also have 3 Deep Meditations, 3 Ritual Renewals, it was just too much, right? So then you can start including things like a little bit of Capsize action. 3 Time Tricks was too much. And then also, you know, I knew that I liked Gruesome Theater, and I knew that I liked Steel Tempest, but I couldn't decide on which one. Well, the answer was both, you know? So stuff like that. Only 1 Deny because there's not that many spell-based win cons in Eternal right now. All of these things, 1 Spirit Fire, if someone just goes like super wide with 2 1s and you just want to pull the trigger on a Spirit Fire, it's there as a one-off. And then yeah, 1 Will of Ionia just because I don't want to fully commit to 3 Capsizes because sometimes you need fast speed answers. But you also have Homecoming, obviously, Steel Gale, Steel Tempest, Gruesome Theater, like lots of fast speed stuff. So really just 2 slow speed cards is about perfect in terms of what this card does, which is slow down your opponent from playing stuff that same turn. Because usually if you're playing like against like a Zigs Poppy player and you just Will of Ionia something, well, they're just like, well, I don't care, everything in my hand costs nothing. So at least if you Capsize a 3-drop or a 2-drop, they can't just replay it if they only have 4 mana. So if you basically Capsize a 2-drop, that's guaranteed to stay off the field for that turn at least. So it's a little bit better in certain situations. But yeah, you know, Ryse, this is a good deck. But typically, what's, you know, kind of new and performing really, really well is upgraded Zigs Poppy. So I talked about this a long time ago, this exact deck. I've shown it off many, many times. And typically what happens is that it takes around 3 to 6 months for a deck that I show off to get picked up by Runeterra AR. They're a little slow that way, but eventually it happens, and they never credit me. So like Emp Army was picked up by Sunny and called the best deck in LOR history, right? He just like ratioed 1 card. So that was obviously me. And in this instance, we're looking at 70% autopilot. So like in pure stats. Now the gentleman said that he found this on Runeterra AR stats and then grabbed it. So he wasn't taking it from me. He was taking it from Metastats and Runeterra AR. I don't know if that's true because when I looked, I couldn't find it listed anywhere else except what he posted. Personally, I couldn't find it anywhere else. So I'm not sure if that's true or not, but he might be right. regardless of whether he took it from me or he took it from Runeterra AR, which took it from me. The result is the same, which is that my new aggro deck is autopiloting a win rate of 70% wins out of 40 games. So that's very, very good. Any aggro deck that can autopilot 70% of games is one of the best aggro decks in the format. So like this upgraded version of Zigs Poppy, which is what I called it, that was like my mindset. It's just like I was playing Zigs Poppy, and I'm like, this deck has some weaknesses. There are certain things about Zigs Poppy that I don't like. Namely, I felt Poppy on 4 as a 3/3 coming down on 4 was too easy to remove in a variety of ways. A little too easy. And then if Poppy doesn't get to swing on 4, you basically lose so much tempo. So at high levels, I felt that, you know, Vex coming down as a 5/4 fearsome that also pings something when it swings is just like having a bigger Ziggs in the deck. And that's exactly what happened. It's just like Ziggs on 3, Vex on 4 is so ugly to deal with for a variety of decks, and it's so powerful. Because obviously being a 3/4 makes it very hard to remove, and then being a 5/4 for 4 is very hard to remove on curve, just like both of these plays. And then in terms of turn 1, all you have to do, turn 1 and turn 2, all you have to do is spam out 3 1-drops. You don't have to be that creative about it. So spam out 3 1-drops, play Ziggs, play Vex, win game. And like that, because even if the opponent is able to answer everything you do, they will most definitely be in a burn lethal range. And that's exactly what happened, is that in 70% of games, that automatically just happens. That you are able to essentially aggro down the opponent, get them into lethal range, get them into burn range, with a combination of aggressive units and overstatted for mana costed champions. And yeah, so, you know, kudos to me, I guess, because, you know, previously, when I talked about creating meta decks, this is, out of all the meta decks that I've created and that have been taken from me, this is technically the highest win rate one out of all of them. You know, Emp Army was 60%, pretty good deck. Ryse was 50%, but again, that's good for Ryse. It's actually higher than what you will see on Runeterra AR right now in terms of a win rate from Ryse. So my version of Ryse is still the best in terms of stats, pure Ryse. Then we also have obviously Nightfall, which I believe Nightfall in Standard was winning something like 56 to 58%. But yeah, nothing 70% yet. So this is it. This is the best aggro deck, new aggro deck that has been built. Now, obviously, there's nothing new under the sun. A lot of this package is inspired by existing Zigs Poppy. But there are things that are unique to it. Legion Grenadier, right, actually kind of overperforms when it's paired up with Stone Stackers. This Gloom Sprites, you know, does pretty well in the 1 slot, which you don't always see Gloom Sprites. A lot of the time you'll see Crimson Pigeon. Why am I using Gloom Sprites instead of Crimson Pigeon? Well, because the simple answer is that Crimson Pigeon, in order to become a 3/3, has to ping something. And if you're pinging your own units, that opens them up for flocks. It opens them up for, well, just pings of their own and things of that nature. I don't know. I felt that the Gloom Sprites was just slightly better than the Pigeon. But if you want to do Pigeon, you can do Pigeon. Go nuts, right? If you want to Pigeon your Stone Stackers, I think that's still very viable, right? But, you know, we're talking about like micro adjustments here. So like we're starting off at a 70% win rate with the way that I built the deck, and then anything that you can do, which is potentially Pigeon, that's the only swap I can think of, might take the deck a little bit further in terms of win rate. Like you go from 70 to like 72%. You're not going to get much higher. 70% autopilot is like the gold standard for an aggro deck. It doesn't get much better than that, statistically speaking. You can have piloting improvements. So it's like someone can have a really good piloting run where they don't lose and then you win 100% of games. But like in terms of like auto-piloting stats, like broad averages, it doesn't get much better than 70%. Over, you know, 40, 50 games, it's pretty good. But yeah, you know, try the Pigeon swap if you want. It's not going to make a big difference. but this is the way that I had built it originally, and this is the deck that was stolen from me, or borrowed, we'll say politely. And this is the deck that won 70% of games on Eternal. You know, I guess that means that I've officially made it as a deck brewer. I don't know, because obviously we had things like Ryse, which is like one of the worst decks in Eternal, and the best version of that deck was built by me. We have, you know, now one of the best versions of Aggro built by me. Nightfall Standard was like mid-range. You know, my actual opinion in terms of my decks is that most of my decks are in fact sleeper playable, right? Like, there's very few decks of mine that I would not personally recommend for level competitive play. That's just anything that I'm playing that I am winning with is inherently good because I am more or less the format master in LOR history, right? Like a lot of there are players who can play better at a higher win rate, but there are very few players who can play at a higher win rate as wide as me with the variety of decks that I can pilot and create. And we're seeing that be the case, where again, you know, 6 months later, after I built this upgraded version of Zigs Poppy, it is now seeing top level play as a valid alternative to the best deck in the format. Zigs Poppy is the best deck in the format. We know this. Now, it just turns out that Ziggs Vex is similarly also the best deck in the format, right? Or one of the best aggro decks in the format. It's right up there with like Pirate Aggro and yeah, Zigs Poppy, Ziggs Vex. Annie Jin is a little lower typically at like 60%. But you know, these are all the best aggro decks in the format. So all I've done is added one more option to include alongside those other decks, and that option just happens to be just as good. Not a surprise. Like, again, people who have followed my channel, you know that like right now I'm entirely focused on my career. I'm entirely focused on being, you know, kind of the best marketing. I guess if life had a rank, you know, ranks, right? I'm focused on ranking up in life in the field of my career, which is marketing. And that's going well. But everything that I've talked about on this channel previously, everything about gaming that I've talked about on this channel previously still applies. Nothing's different. So like even stuff like this, which is just like, you know, meta elusive spam, right? Like this is something that I talk about a lot, and I say that like I think elusive spam is kind of a sleeper. I've said this before. So this is Swim Elusives upgraded with Veil Blessing, which wasn't available to him at the time. And so everything in the deck is just like burst, right? So burst on the Veiled Blessing, burst on the Blessing of Targon, burst on the Battle Bonds. You drop the 3 mana. I'm not a huge fan of the 3 mana 1/2 elusive. I think it's slightly understated. There are decks that it does well in, but I just don't think in this deck where you're trying to go as fast as you want to go, you want to be on Sparkle Sprite or Sparkle Fly. But yeah, you know, I think that like if someone was serious about piloting this deck, I think that this would autopilot 60%. Like I'm no joke. I'm 100% serious that if you wanted to be serious about playing this deck, you could do about 60%. So just Teemo, Zoe, Acorn, Erasmus, Lunare Shade Stalker, Mystic Shot, Pale Cascade, Darkened Lodestone, One Get Excited, Veiled Blessing, Winged Messenger, Augmented Clockling, Blessing of Targon, and then Battle Bonds. You'll have bad matchups, specifically into any matchup that uses Flocks and Disintegrates. You're just going to auto-lose with this deck because the whole point of this deck is that every time your opponent tries to remove one of your elusives, all you do is burst, protect them, and make them bigger so they swing for more damage on the attack. That's what the deck does, right? It's a little like Ribbon Fizz. If you've ever seen that deck, Ribbon Fizz functions very similarly. But yeah, I think the deck's great, right? But like at the end of the day, not everyone is going to gravitate towards all of my decks. Like I can't just like point out, you know, 10 of my decks and be like, all of this stuff is playable. You should play this and get stats for it and tell your friends, right? Like not all of that's gonna happen. Even if it could potentially, because again, most of my decks are quite strong. and always have been since like my out of card days a long time ago. Like yes, some of my decks are memeier, but there are very few of my decks that are unplayable. But obviously, yeah, at the top end of the spectrum, it's just like, you know, you accidentally make the next best aggro deck in Eternal. That's it for updates from me. Again, not going to be doing a ton of uploading because I'm just like 100% job focused right now. I'm playing a lot of my Steam Deck as well, just because that's like easier. But and then yeah, dating, you know, not really happening right now. It's just not a priority. It's kind of funny because I think when men specifically, you know, when they go through a breakup or they get evaluated poorly by a partner or a past partner, they almost immediately improve their standing, right? Where it's just like, okay, you thought I was this, haha, joke's on you. Turns out that I'm just gonna like immediately double my salary, right? Or double my, you know, get the next executive level of management, and I'm just gonna do that in like a month. After, you know, a breakup or a bad situation. And, you know, I think that's a uniquely male experience. Some guys go to the gym and they're like, oh, I'm going to get super swole and I'm going to get like super hot coming off of a breakup, right? That's their road to self-improvement, is they want to know how much iron they can bench. I'm not really the type to be benching anything, but I can exercise my mind. And that's what work is to me, is a way of exercising my mind and then getting compensated for that. And the reality is, you know, I hope I go through more breakups in the future, because then maybe that'll, you know, be the motivation to take it even further to the next step. Bigger brands, bigger budgets, bigger opportunities. You know, so I don't know. Maybe that's, I don't know if anyone can relate to that, where it's just like, okay, sure, I'll just do better and be better. And then you can just kind of stick to your narrative and the life that you think you want to be living. While I just kind of do life goals, financial goals, and essentially do the human equivalent of ranking up on ladder. I guess in that way, gaming and our real life does have some comparison points. So yeah, play my deck, win 70% of games automatically, or, you know, focus on your life goals and your career goals, and then win at that. Either way, I think Eternal King is gonna salute you guys. All right, this is Eternal King signing out.